Some of the guests I've gotten, I cannot believe that I can now text. Like, I'm texting executive producers, showrunners, directors, writers, casting directors. It's been so incredible for my network, but also in how I'm able to relate to these people. I think, I've been doing this for years. I've been an actor for years. And I felt like sometimes even like I was intimidated by people I didn't want to be intimidated by anymore. Like, I felt like I'd gone to these casting director workshops. I'd given all these producers and directors all this power in my auditions. And something really changed when I was talking to them just one-on-one. Those have been stuff that I never thought I would get out of. I just wanted to start a podcast and talk to people and learn from them.
Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jack Smart, the movies staff writer at People magazine. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Simone Miller, Sam Valentine, and Breanna Wing. Hi, all.
Hey.
Hey.
Good, how are you?
I'm so good. I do really want to ask how everyone is, especially at this exact moment in time and an exact moment of the history of this guild. But first, can we go around the horn here and I want to have each of you give me the 1 or 2 sentence pitch or the explanation, the purpose of your podcast that you're here to discuss today. I'm going to start with Michelle because she's the most left on my screen.
Yeah, I'll take it. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Simone Miller, and I host Mentors on Mic podcast, where I interview incredible mentors in the entertainment industry, focusing on how they started and how they moved up to where they are today.
Beautiful. Breanna.
Said it a few times.
Hi, everyone. I'm Breanna Wing. I am a partner and co-host of Cinematography for Actors. We aim to bridge the gap between talent and crew through technically focused interviews. And our goal is to elevate the art of effective visual storytelling, practically, creatively, and technically.
So wonderful. And Sam.
Cool. Hi, I'm Sam Valentine. I run the One Broke Actress podcast, which is an honest account of actor life, plus a few lessons I learned in the process. So it's a big mix of actors and as well as people who can change our day-to-day lives, people in and behind the camera, above the line, below the line, and also my life in the process and how this career looks from the inside.
Well, and what a perfect transition, because going off of that, I do just want to ask, I guess it's the question is, how are you all doing right now? We're November 2023. For anybody who's watching this later, I find that I imagine that this is a really interesting time to be a working actor. What was the summer like for you all? What were these strikes like? What is your relationship with your work right now, with the biz right now? Anyone who wants to go first?
A lot of picketing, which was so much fun, such a great sort of example of solidarity. So that was really great to be able to get together with other union members and just, ask for what we want. In terms of podcasts, I don't know what you guys, it's been like the last few months. Most of my episodes are really geared towards people talking about their projects along their careers. And although I have some people who are not in film and TV, I just didn't want to push it. I just didn't want to talk about struck work at all. So I did put out occasional episodes that didn't have to do with it or that I didn't get to talk about TV and film. But for the most part, I'm on hiatus, except for the occasional episodes. So.
Gotcha. See, that's great to hear right there. Because the times they are changing. These updates are up to the day, right?
Yeah, speaking to that. So personally, I got married this summer, which was crazy.
Congratulations.
I know, thank you. But my wedding was scheduled for the end of July and the strike started just a couple weeks prior. So I was on the phone with my reps and they were like, everything was changing. I'm trying to plan and pay for a wedding when we're about to go into no work. So personally, we're all stressed for many different reasons, but I have such a great team. They're like, just focus on your wedding, come back, and we'll handle it from there. Professionally, with the podcast, a lot of things were happening because we interview a lot of filmmakers, talent, and crew. And so we kept interviewing because we were able to avoid talking about struck work a lot of the time, especially because a lot of our interviews, especially with DPs, camera operators, what are conversations you're having with actors if you are using a Steadicam shot, or if you swap lenses and the actor doesn't know what that means, what are you saying to the actors? What questions are they asking you? So we were able to kind of circumvent that, but we were the official podcast partners for 2 film festivals, which I have to say is why I was so happy that we are a SAG signatory podcast, because we were able to email SAG in anticipation of both festivals, and they were helping us so much navigate what work was struck and what wasn't, because we were so afraid of making a mistake, because in the beginning we were all navigating it together, and we didn't want to, if a new indie short filmmaker was really proud of their shot, we wanted them to talk about it. But if by accident they referenced a really famous struck film shot, we were like, oh no, do we have to? And we were live streaming too. So we had a couple people behind the scenes that were ready to pause a live stream or edit on the fly. So we made it work, but it's just another testament to just doing the best you can with all the information you have at the time. And we made it work and we made it through.
That's wild to hear. These are crazy times. Sam, what about you? You mentioned an audition recently.
Yes. I just filmed before I popped on here my first post-strike audition. So we're back. TBD, maybe this will be the last one that I have this year. You just never know. So enjoying that process. I made myself kind of a challenge of, I want to see if I can make my podcast as consistent as possible this year. So we did not stop, and we have not stopped. And I'm also under the SAG signatory agreement, which more people need to talk about. And I'm so excited to talk about it because it helped me achieve healthcare for the first time this year. And so it's been, with all the craziness that's going on, I've actually really managed to find a great place right now where I love the creative work I'm doing. I was able to devote a lot of time to my day jobs and the companies I run during the strike. And then every time I got out on the line, I felt kind of like I was on set. It was like we were all equal. It was like we were all cast in the same thing for a while. Everyone was, in sweaty t-shirts and gross and ball caps and just doing the same thing. And it just felt like such an equalizing moment. I will be interested to see how we can keep that or how fast it goes away in the coming months. But I really found a way to make life as consistent as possible over the last couple of months, which is not always welcome for us in the day-to-day artist life. So I'm fine.
That's so, yeah, these are great. This is all great data to have, I think, for everyone listening to this. At this really crucial and really interesting time in the biz. Podcasting, just to talk about why this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. When I was at Backstage Magazine, I started an interview podcast called In the Envelope, which is actually still going strong. And it was such an amazing process. And there were resources out there to figure out how to launch it. But we were winging it. I was just winging it in terms of the hosting and in terms of the producing. I might ask each of you how you define the term producer, because it's like a term that means a lot of different things. But if we can today add to the amount of resources for people who might want to start their own podcast, I think that is kind of the goal here. So going off of that, why? Why did you start? What were the purposes of it? I also am curious, is there an overlap between between the acting skills and then the hosting part of podcasting?
I started my podcast in 2016 as a blog because I had a lot of feelings and I didn't know what to do with them. She just has a lot of feelings. I was completely unclear on my place in the business. I felt like quitting a lot, and I had just done some of the biggest work I've ever done. And people were like, you've made it. And I was like, I don't know if it's going to come out. I don't know what happens now. And my agents were like, don't go get a day job. And I was like, but how do I pay for classes? And, it was very much the prime time of you put your best foot forward on social media. And I had no best foot. So I decided to kind of go the opposite direction and say hey, I'm just another broke actor, and brokeactor.com was taken. So I started One Broke Actress, and I started interviewing actors and talking to them. And I was like, how have you done this? There's gotta be some through lines here. There's gotta be some stuff I'm missing. What is it? And I would take their interviews and I would transcribe them, which if anybody has read anything I've ever written, that's a horrible idea because I'm the biggest misspeller ever. And then I realized I already had a podcast that was going separately at that time. And I said, well, this is going to just be a podcast. And it had ebbs and flows over the last few years, but it was really made to be information that I wish I would have had when I was starting in this business / also now. And there is 100% overlap for me because my ability to have conversations, for example, what we're doing right now in front of a lot of people, I believe all of us, I bet all these women's media training is at a 10. I think we could probably do anything or figure out anyone or have conversations with a houseplant because it's just what you learn to do. And it's fed into my acting career in listening ways, in a lot of ways. It's given me access to a lot of people that I have no business speaking with. It's connected me to people that I never knew I would be able to have a connection with. And not that that's necessarily equaled rungs on the acting ladder. It's just changed how I view the business and how much closer everything feels, where it used to feel very far away. And it actually became my side job. And I now actually produce podcasts, to your producer question.
Aha, yes. Okay, cool. And it's all kind of interwoven. These paths kind of overlap and you never know where it takes you. Yeah. Breanna?
So cinematography for actors has evolved a lot in a short period of time. There is a team of us that I love. There's 4 of us now that rotate hosting duties, especially when we are a podcast partner at a film festival. We're cycling in and out, but it was started and co-founded by a DP and an actor, an incredible cinematographer named Indiana Underhill, and another wonderful actress named Haley Royal. And they were having a conversation about an experience the cinematographer had on set where an actress wasn't quite hitting an eye line to hit her eye light. And the actress was talking about how there's so many acting classes in town: improv, audition, scene study, audition for camera, audition in person. But there's not a ton of technical training for actors in terms of when you hear a lens being swapped, what does that mean for the speed of which we should sit down in our chair? And who are we allowed to ask without feeling embarrassed? And it's empowering to know I can introduce myself to that camera operator and I'm not in the wrong for doing so. And so I worked with the DP on a short film. We hit it off. They had already started the podcast and I became completely obsessed with it. And then I joined forces and we continued to grow it because I got my start in the industry in the art department in production. So not as an actor. I studied drafting and set design. And so when I became an actor, I knew who everybody was on set. But I felt so fortunate for knowing or looking around, a sound stage and being, I know what that guy is doing far in the dark corner with cables, or that guy that's, polishing props. And that felt comforting. And I felt okay knowing maybe it's not appropriate to ask that person, but I'll ask that person. So we had this community growing of actors and our DP, and we just kept wanting to talk about why and who it was okay to talk to on set as a goal to empower actors. But then we also realized it was empowering for filmmakers too, because we started getting a mix of directors, producers, DPs, camera operators, Steadicam operators, specifically actors that have worked with a Steadicam operator and what that conversation was like. So it's continued to evolve over time. And then we also have another incredible tech guy and writer on board, Jack Gibson, that I want to shout out to because it really is a community that we're building.
So cool. There's a niche to fill that you saw, and then a community both that's already in place, but that you're also building, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Really interesting. And Michelle?
All right. So I created my podcast in July 2020, which right at the height of the pandemic. And I felt like everything shut down. And I asked myself, what is something that I've always wished I had time for and thought one day I'll do it, and then never did it. So, and that was create a podcast. And simultaneously, I started doing these panels for the place that I graduated from, Brandeis University. I started doing panels with industry alum. I think it was really general at the time, but I created the topic which was how does one start in the industry, and then how does one get to where they are today? And so I asked these 4 incredible people, what's your story? What was your first job in the industry? What was this? How'd you get to the next place? And as that conversation developed, I remember it was over and I was like, this was so fun. Like something just felt really right in doing that. And I felt like I wish I had the time to speak to each person individually for like an hour. So those things combined, I thought, why not ask them? So that's when I started reaching out to both people I didn't know who maybe were alum from my university, and people I did know, so people in my network. And then, so a friend of mine, who she might be on the call, I'm not sure, Jacqueline Collier, she was very lovely and she sent me a book called So You Want to Start a Podcast. So I found that to be a really incredible resource for me personally, because it just went through everything from programs to what mics I should get, what headphones I should get, how do I craft my show notes, etc. So that was really helpful. And started something fantastic. I'm now started gearing up for season 5, which is really cool. I've had over like 120 something episodes. I don't know, but it's been really great, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
So cool to hear. That's so inspiring to hear. And it sounds like for all of you, it sounds like there was this listening to your gut moment of realizing there was a niche to fill, or there was a passion for you to follow that led to these projects. And it can't help but be personal, I suppose, when you're the producer and you're the host, and it has to come from you and you have to talk about your life and your experience. What were the other benefits that have come of having these podcasts that maybe you didn't expect? Are they great networking opportunities? Are they great for just keeping you busy?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what were the other benefits outside of just following that initial call, I guess?
Well, Sam kind of sort of started a little bit, but some of the guests I've gotten, I cannot believe that I can now text. Like I'm texting executive producers, showrunners, directors, writers, casting directors. I just went to a movie with a friend of mine who was on the podcast. He was a big producer and in development. It's been so incredible for my network, but also in how I'm able to relate to these people. I think, I've been doing this for years. I've been an actor for years. And I felt like sometimes even like I was intimidated by people I didn't want to be intimidated by anymore. Like I felt like I had gone to these casting director workshops. I'd given all these producers and directors all this power in my auditions. And something really changed when I was talking to them just one-on-one. I started to identify like what's my real voice, and what's like the heightened voice that I use for people that I might be intimidated by. And so I started focusing on that. I started focusing on listening more to my subject. So I felt like all of that helped. And I've gotten a couple job opportunities from it. So those have been stuff that I never thought I would get out of. I just wanted to start a podcast and talk to people and like learn from them. So those were the things that surprised me.
Cool.
2 things come to mind for me. One is making the transition from production to acting. A big experience I had is I tried doing both for a while, but some people listening this might resonate with them. But when I was still working in production, or I was somebody's assistant and I would act on the side or have auditions, it was often, oh, you're acting too, that's so cute, but your real job is in production. And then it's like, oh man. So I realized in my giant, transition, I really had to leave that, at least in my case, and go 100% in on acting, for people to stop asking if I was still production designing projects and only think of me as an actor. And now I've come full circle again, and I can be a multi-hyphenate. But for a while, it was tricky to navigate that. So in doing the podcast, I have reached back out to so many contacts that maybe I haven't spoken to in a decade that I used to work with on episodic or features. But also in our interviews, when we do our research, when we know we have a guest coming on, selfishly, I'm just asking questions I would want to ask them if we had coffee, just one-on-one. And so I feel like I'm personally benefiting from this, but if other people can too, and we can push it out to this platform, great. Now thousands of people probably want to know, when I first get on set and I'm staring at the camera operator, is it okay to introduce myself? Yes. sometimes they're intimidated by us too. And their boss has said, don't talk to the actors. So it's like so nice to have a really candid conversation with all the camera department members and have them be like, no, we're scared of you. Or that's just one example. One person said one. So I just selfishly ask questions I want to know before I get to set, and then educate the masses in the meantime.
Love that.
Yeah. It's so true though. Those always make the best questions, right? Of like, if you're thinking it, you know someone else is thinking it.
Yes, and you just like hope somebody, and that's what I love too, because we have a DP, we have 2 actors, we have a writer, and so like our questions often are pretty varied. So our listeners can come from a lot of angles. It's not, we're called Cinematography for Actors, but we've realized as we've grown, we have an audience, and usually a question is asked from a perspective that somebody has or has been too nervous to ask, or because our DP side of things, you know, she's one of our dearest friends, we can embarrassingly be like, what is it? What does this camera lens mean? When they swap, or when she starts getting really technical and talking about different rental houses. I know we had a podcast where they were talking about like a squishy lens, and they just kept talking because we had a DP guest and a DP host. And then the 2 actors were like, hey, over here, what does that even mean?
Yeah, wait, what is a squishy lens?
That's a great question. See, I'm even like, I gotta go rewatch it again. But it's basically, it's designed to create optical effects by bending light. And I guess it actually can be manipulated. So that's what I learned. But see, that's a great question. I don't even remember everything I've always learned, but we can not be embarrassed to ask those questions on our podcast.
Yeah. Yeah,
and I gave a short, concise answer to what a squishy lens is.
No, now we have to go listen to the podcast episode, so it's fine.
Right? Yeah.
Great marketing. Everything that Michelle and Breanna said is like exactly how I feel. I've met so many cool people. I've asked so many questions. The thing that I had no idea that was coming when I was like, I'm going to start recording the sound of my own voice, was that this would become my job. I opened a podcast production company in 2022 called Fast Forward Productions. And we primarily help female podcast hosts get started. We have some full-time clients where we do all of their podcasts for them. And we have like some podcast schools and classes and things like that to help people get off the ground. Because like you said, Michelle, it's just like you need a book. It sounds so easy. And I think early on it was portrayed as you and your friends get together and you get microphones and you have a glass of wine and you just record. And that's totally cool. And you can still do that, but ain't nobody going to listen unless you're famous. So how do you build that without that? And maybe you don't want to have a glass of wine, and like what microphone is actually going to plug into your computer and all of these things. So learning that side of it, I remember there was a day I finally purchased a real microphone and cords and like a mini mixer, and none of it worked. And I went to Sam Ash's down the street for me, the music store, and I brought everything in my laptop and I dumped it on the table in front of the guy. And I was like, I don't think I need to buy anything, but I will give you so much money if you can just make this all work. Like, I'll give you $200. I don't even care, like whatever you can do. He was like, you just need like this little thing to plug in. I was like, great. But it used to be, it was so complicated. And now there's tons of programs that make it so much easier, and tons of, free places you can start a podcast and things like that. But like, there's just so much, and learning that side and learning the business of it has really built in an income stream for me that has been so consistent outside of acting. And I actually have 5 actors on my team, so I get to hire actors and pay them now. So it's just like such a gift to be able to give the thing that I've always wanted. It's like working for another actor, and one of my actors gets an audition, and I'm like, great. What podcast do you need early so you can edit them, so you can go film without thinking about work this weekend? And it's a dream. It's a dream come true. I'm, every day I'm like, is this real?
That's such a dream. Yeah, that's so lovely to hear. And what a perfect transition to, we have some questions coming in, which are so great. And thank you all for these. But Sam, what you were just talking about in terms of also this aspect of getting it started and getting it to the point where it might even be an income stream. I want to make sure that we touch on the SAG signatory podcast and independent podcast agreements, and where does SAG-AFTRA factor into all this? Because this is the question that I have to admit, I don't know the answer. This is the part where I have to come to you guys and say, what is this? How does this work? What are these contracts?
Yeah. And I'm sure I'm going to say something odd. Breanna, you can keep an eye on me because I might out of something here. I'm newer to it, but it was created by SAG. Oh, you too? Okay, great.
All new. I feel like it's new-ish, right? I feel like this is a thing that a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah, it's so amazing because it's SAG is getting with the times of the fact that actors don't just do one thing, and people in this business have multiple streams of income, and you can be an influencer, and you can be a podcaster, and all of these other things, and you can utilize that to sign your podcast or your influencer self, and you can be on a SAG contract, which means you can pay into pension and health, which if anybody is in the social media world, that's like the big thing missing from that being a real consistent lifetime job, is that there's no healthcare and there's no retirement unless you're really, really good at your, IRA and investments. But the SAG contract I signed this year with the help of Shane Griffin, who is a SAG staff member, and she called me and she talked to me through the process. We get lunch now. She's awesome, but she helped me get through the process, and I signed a contract with SAG. And essentially, I take everything I make via my podcast and my bonus podcast and my Patreon and everything, and I total that number up via paperwork for SAG every month. This is a very Cliff's Notes version, so don't hold me to this because every contract is different. But and then 50% of what I make counts towards my pension and health. So that goes towards my $26,500 or whatever the minimum cap is in order to earn health insurance, along with my actor money. So it all congeals as one. So this year, because of commercials in the podcast, I was able to earn healthcare, and I have a credit toward my pension. And I know I'm so excited. And that every month I write a check from my business account. So from One Broke Actress, I pay 10% of that back to the union. So, or 20% of the 50, 10% of the 100, math. And I write that back to the union. And I think it's really cool because that means when someone is helping, paying toward my Patreon or buying a class from me or something, they're also helping subsidize their own union, which is really cool. So it all becomes cyclical, and it gets me really excited, and I love talking to people about it because it's not super advertised yet, and it's going to be, but we've been busy.
Kind of a busy year.
Yes, yeah. And we are part of the Micropod, which is the micro monetized podcast agreement. So for anybody listening that's thinking about starting their own podcast, they're like, I don't generate enough money yet. That's okay, because there are different levels of podcast agreements for you. And I have to say, the guys at SAG, the guys and gals, the human beings at SAG, so helpful, because I didn't even know it was an option until somebody reached out to me and said, you should do this. And we honestly looked around and we said, why? What's in it for us? And then we started learning what, everything Sam just said could help us out. But the biggest thing for us right now, since we're so new, is taking the leap to just start research and learning about it. Because I don't consider myself an expert on the agreement at all. It's still new, and I still comb through everything we can and cannot do. And the riders, for example, we just started having paid advertisements. So that activated a rider on the last page of the contract. And I feel like I've got my glasses on and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to highlight and everything. And then I'm like, don't stress, just email SAG and they'll help you out.
Amazing. Yeah, so amazing.
I think for me, I can't remember exactly. I'm sure, I follow Sam obviously on Instagram. Highly recommend following Sam and Breanna on Instagram. But I remember I think she might have been one of the first people to mention that there were podcast agreements. And I think I might have reached out to you, I'm not sure. And then later on the picket line, right, someone else came up to me and was like, did you hear about these SAG-AFTRA agreements for a podcast? And I was like, well, let me look through. So same thing happened. I looked it up. I reached out to Shane. She was very sweet. She was like, let's hop on a Zoom call. And we hopped on, we talked all about it. It's like really simple to read through. It's not like that many pages of the agreement. You read through it, you feel comfortable, you sign, but it feels right. It feels like, okay, I'm part of this greater thing. And yeah, it's not, I wouldn't call myself an expert on it as well. I think each agreement only covers one season, so I might have to sign again. I have to talk to Shane. I might have to sign another one for my upcoming season, but it was pretty easy to sign, and they're really sweet over there. And it feels nice to be protected by the union.
Absolutely. And it sounds like everyone in the union, and I mean, you three in this meeting, I love that what SAG-AFTRA and I think what the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is all about is sharing all of this info and not hiding or hoarding any of it. All of you have brought this same mission that your union has of like, let's share, let's not conceal. If I think a recurring theme of this conversation is ask questions. Yes. And no question is a dumb question, maybe. And I love this point about like, crew thinks actors are too intimidating to talk to. Actors think crew are too intimidating to talk to. No, let's talk to each other. I have to get to some of the like production-y stuff. We talked about like possibly being a producer. Real quick, Sam, you mentioned some hardware. What about software? I have a question here about what free platforms do you use? Are there any like off the bat, what a novice podcaster should know about the technology that helps you do your jobs? I guess particularly in like the actual audio engineering and editing part.
It's so much easier than it used to be. Oh my God. It's so much. And I say that because it's still complicated in a way because it's a lot, but it used to be so much harder. So you don't need a lot now. There's a program called Spotify for Podcasters. It was formerly called Anchor. I assume we've all been on it or are on it currently. And Anchor was a better name, but whatever. They changed it without consulting me. And the Spotify for Podcasters is free and it has no storage caps. So you can start your podcast on it today. It also has intrinsic in-app editing software. It's not great, but if you're just doing simple edits like cutting some cutting when your dogs bark, whatever it is, it will get you down. Like we're not about to like soundscape like NPR episodes, but you are absolutely going to get a place to throw in an intro, throw in a podcast episode, and throw in an outro. And it's connected to Spotify instantly. So your podcast will instantly be connected to Spotify, and it tells you step by step how to get connected to Apple because it's run by a completely different platform. Apple does not make it easy, but it is still easier than it used to be. And essentially all you need to create a podcast is to record something, put it on one of these podcast platforms, and click publish. You have to have something, and the second you click publish, it creates what's called an RSS feed. That RSS feed is then what is distributed to all of the platforms. And I think that's the most common misconception, is that these platforms are the holders of things. No, they have the easiest job ever. All they do is distribute. Great. It's a great job. It's a great business formula is to just distribute things and not be in charge of them. But you have to have your podcast hosted somewhere else. And then this RSS feed goes out into all the different platforms. Almost all of them are free. And then you can generate your own things from there, but you have to create something, put it in Spotify for Podcasters. See, it's a shitty title. And sorry. I knew I'd do that at some point. And yes, so I think that's the best thing you need. You can use, there's a program called Riverside that I love that records video. That's where I record. People use a program called Descript. That's also really great. You can edit your podcast like a Word document. They really make podcast stuff essentially, I don't mean for dummies, but for those of us who are not audio engineers anymore. They really are doing some great work in all those categories. So those are all of my recommendations.
Yeah. Where was all this in 2017 when I was starting that podcast and didn't know what I was doing? That everything you just described.
We should have hooked up.
This is magic.
But This is why I started classes.
Everyone on this call everyone who's thinking about starting podcasting, it is true that now these days is a better time to do it than it has been in the past.
It's easier than ever. You really could, I mean, every platform could be free if you really looked for it. So I started the first couple seasons of my podcast on Zoom before I switched to Riverside. So I would just take like a Zoom call, take the audio the way SAG is probably going to do with this, and just put it into another free program called Audacity. And I learned how to edit. So part of it was that I remember I learned how to edit some of it, and then some of it was so beyond. It's not like editing a video, which I'm way more comfortable with because I edit my reels. But it was like just editing audio looked very different and intimidating. But I started meeting people in different podcasting communities, and one really sweet girl, Angelica, was like, Michelle, let's hop on a Zoom and I will teach you how to do this right now. And within 20 minutes, never looked back, edited all my episodes. And I do send out my episodes for mastering and polishing from another editor. But aside from that, I edit everything on my own. But yeah, it's completely capable. You're completely capable of doing everything involving podcasts for free. And then as time goes on, you can elevate different parts of the process.
On that note, I want to say that we have had podcasts that we did have to record over Zoom because they weren't in person. And so you can take that video file and then just drag it into Spotify for podcasters, and it will just take the audio. If you are recording a Zoom any video and you want, you plan on uploading it to YouTube, you can also just extract the audio by dragging and dropping. But another great thing about Spotify for podcasters is that, let's say, like during the strike, we realized we needed to remove something was published, and then within a second we were like, that wasn't supposed to be published yet because we noticed a mistake. Delete it off Spotify for podcasters, and it takes it off everything that it's pushed it out to. And I'm going to go shut the door. I'll be right back.
Thank you. That's great. This is all so helpful to hear. And then, of course, the next, I guess, phase of production, we have several questions about marketing and just sharing it. And I know you're all pros at social media, and the social media aspect is maybe part of it, but how generally do you think about sharing or getting your podcasts out there?
I have a very strong opinion that you don't necessarily need your own podcast page for everything, especially not yet. If you're getting started, I think that the people who already follow you are already your audience. Like, let's be honest, your first couple podcasts are going to get like 20 listens, and 5 of them are going to be your mom. You know what I mean? Like on different devices. Like it's going to be, and it is what it is. That's how this medium goes. And it takes so long to build up a large number. It takes so long, but that consistency is the thing that like does it. It's just like, it's just magic of consistency, kind of like an acting career, unfortunately. So I think that is, it's going to feel weird at first because you're going to be like, this is me talking about myself on this whatever. And, you know, it's going to be the sound of your own voice is going to make you want to like put your face through a wall, but you get over it at some point.
Thank you. I found it was a year. I got over it after a year, but it was a year of me being like, I hate the sound of my own voice and I have to listen to it all the time.
Yeah. I used to, if I would like,
go for it.
I was just saying, like, when I first started doing it, I was like, oh, I need to re-listen to that episode because like I like coughed or I hiccuped or I quivered or whatever. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm a human being. Everybody does these things. It makes it more relatable.
Yeah.
That was so true. I think actually I spoke with Sam about this where I reached out. Well, that's the other thing I would say too. Reach out to people, like have mentors in the podcasting world to just ask stuff. But I think I remember asking Sam and I was like, do you edit out the like uns and likes? And she was like, not for a long time. Like you were like, I stopped doing that. And I was like, okay, great. Because we're humans and we do that. And that's totally filler words, totally fine. I will say that marketing, I want to give some good tips. I had the director of audience development at iHeartMedia talk about, related to custom podcasts, give some advice as to how she builds audiences. And one thing that stuck out, she was like, definitely get on other people's podcasts, obviously, but also do podcast promo swaps, also try to like, you know, so anything like that. But really, it starts with your network. It starts with, like Sam said, like the first 20 people who listen or whomever, it's going to be people you know. And then eventually, like things start to spread, but you don't really worry about that as much. You just keep creating your own thing. And that's what I really love about podcasting, because it's something that I was able to create on my own that I have full sort of power over. And I could create stuff. I could create stuff every day with the comfort of, you know, my own home with my like microphone. And it could be solo episodes or it could be episodes with other people. And I have full power over it. And I felt like as an actor, I mean, I'm starting to learn more and more about how to, get back my power as an actor. But for the most part, I got that because of the energy I put into my podcast and how I get to create something that's all my own and develop a voice and then bring that back to my acting, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so cool to hear.
Another point is like most guests you have on, when you share and tag them, they're then going to share and reshare. And if you have multiple guests on, that just also expands it. So don't underestimate the power of your guest sharing, because they're excited to have been interviewed as well.
Yeah. And we all started our podcast before the collaboration button existed. And like, that is cool. That a way, like I share something and then so like, if you can get them in time enough in case their social media is planned or whatever to like collaborate on a post, like that's great. Cause then you're getting double the audience. And that is, this is why I also I would recommend if you can record with video, it's really nice because you can instantly cut social media pieces out of it. And so you can take that middleman out of it. I like Riverside for that because you can cut it into the actual correct size. You can put all of your own, now they have captions on there. I think you can do basically anything on it. You can put your logo on there. It's seamless. And I think just, figuring out your own sound bites does take a while, but I think video is something I would highly recommend people like tiptoe towards because the podcast YouTube audience is huge.
There are people who just listen to podcasts by going onto YouTube. It's very true.
Isn't that so weird? I think it's weird. I love you guys. I love whoever listening to it right now. That's it. But like, I don't do it.
You just never know how anyone prefers to consume their media. So might as well use that RSS feed, use all social media platforms to get it out there. I think video, it's a really important point, Sam, like in terms of marketing and promotion, video is visual. So potential audience members they glimpse it maybe on their social media and they're more inclined to jump in.
And what's also cool, which I only started doing, I think this past year, was I have an IMDb page now for Mentors on the Mic. And so I'm able to tag all these incredible people that are now, so like Tony Goldwyn on Scandal, he also has a Mentors on the Mic credit. And like Marta Kaufman, who created Friends, also has a Mentors on the Mic credit. So there's something really cool about that I also hear about sometimes, that people say, oh, I found you on so-and-so's IMDb. And I'm like, that's unexpected. Thank you.
Yeah, that is so, I didn't even know. That's so cool. We do have to wrap soon. And I want to make sure that I ask a couple of these questions are about monetization. I mean, I'm going to be honest. A couple of these questions are just about like, how do I make money doing this? And maybe that's the realest question of all. Where does that factor into those contracts? Can I ask also, is it a separate question or is it a related question? I'm not sure, about advertisers and actually getting collabs with other people beyond just the sharing, the podcast swapping and promoting each other's podcasts. What about actual products and actual ads?
I'll just start because I think Sam is just the best person to ask about this personally, because I follow you for a while now, so I know that I know exactly some of the stuff you make money from, and I'm so impressed. But I will add, so I've done affiliates for the most part. I know that some people go to particular, maybe smaller businesses as they start that are specific for their audience, and then pitch them the idea of, okay, for this amount of episodes, maybe with an additional like social media shout out, et cetera. Or if you develop a newsletter, you can add that as well into a package and be like, you can you can ask for this much money per episode, that sort of thing. I haven't really done that yet. I probably will for season 5. Or what some people do, which I'm also talking to people about, is joining wider networks that will provide the sponsors for you. So those are 2 different ways that I've seen. And then I'm kind of thinking about as I move on to season 5. Breanna, I don't know about you, but like Sam is killing it. So I want to say the best. And I really admire you with how you monetize your podcast. But
I'll just add a little bit and let Sam go too. But we have reached out to partners and other sponsors that we've worked with, giving them like airtime, ad time. We'll send them copy and we'll get compensated for doing that at all. But also when you're getting started, before monetization, getting gear to work with by giving them a shout out on the podcast is also a great way to start getting equipment if you don't even have the money to start doing that.
Yeah.
But admittedly, that was I felt really vulnerable doing that. That's, and I'm so grateful for the CFA team because there is a group of us. So we all always check in with who feels comfortable doing what. But going outside of your comfort zone is something, whether it's asking questions or interviewing or being a host or starting to have those financial conversations. Something in the beginning I was really nervous about and still not my strong suit, but another reason why having a podcast is an unexpectedly great thing because it forces you to start doing things you're kind of uncomfortable with. Okay, Sam.
Also, you can do a bartering system too, which is really cool. So I don't know if you guys ever done this, but I'll talk to different organizations or programs that I feel really passionate about, and will either pay for part of their service in exchange for promotion or something like that. That's been really wonderful too. But anyway, Sam, take it over.
You built me up into a lot. So here's the thing. I think initially, you should not at all, don't expect your podcast to pay you back. It's going to cost money to get set up. It's going to cost your time to get going. I think just like an acting career, if you're okay, great, I'm starting a podcast in 6 months, I want to monetize, you will set yourself up for failure because you're still going to have 60 listeners. And once again, 5 of them are going to be your mom. So I started out very, very slowly. And I was like, why don't people want to podcast advertise on me? And it's been a great lesson in terms of business of acting too, because the platform wasn't worth a lot in the beginning because there's no eyes on it. Just like an actor, you have to build the worth in for people to give you money, which is just business 101, I guess. No one taught me that in theater school. And I started with reaching out to people who, like Michelle said, who I was like, hey, I love this stand for my computer. I use it every time I record a podcast. Can I post about it on social media and talk about it in my podcast? And can I do anything for you? What would you offer or whatever? And they're like, we'll send you a free stand and we'll send you one to give away. I was like, sick. And I was like, I'm rich. This is awesome. So it started with small things like that. And then I slowly started to, affiliates was a great place to start too. I would, if someone wanted to, people once you have people looking at your things, then people will come to you and they're like, sell my stuff. And you have to learn to say no because you don't want to sell everything for everyone because then no one trusts your opinion. So giving it time to build in that trust is a big part of it too. I say no to a lot of things. And sometimes people will give me something and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I will talk about this for free on my podcast, on my Instagram, whatever. Can I just do you have an affiliate program? Can I sign up? And every time someone signs up for this, can I have, $5 or $10 or whatever? And I made quite a bit of money from that initially because I waited for so long to monetize that by the time I did talk about things, people were like, oh, Sam really likes this thing. So that's the gift of waiting to make money, is that I really could pick and choose. And now over the past couple of years, I reach out to advertisers. I made up my own. No one tells you this stuff. I was like, this is how much podcast advertising costs. Pulling it out of the air. No one tells you. I was like, this makes sense in my head. And then people were like, I'll pay that. And I'm like, should have asked for more. It's a weird business. Game because it's that's all business. Fake. It's business. It's business. So now
it's not regulated,
and there's what it is.
No consistency.
It's so unregulated. Yeah, and you can, I charge a lot more for things to do with the acting world than I do for an average product because that is so niche with my content. So anyway, I also think that starting to just share about things on your platform and then letting the businesses know is also a great way to do that. So if you mention, I always talked about, I love this nail polish. Sometimes I change my nail color for a role if I have the time. That sounds fun. Sometimes I play a girl, a Boston girl, and she's serving up the drinks or whatever. It's a terrible accent, but I would put on nails to do it. And so I talked about those nails. And then I reached out to that nail company and I was like, here's the times I've advertised and you didn't even know it. I sent them screenshots of my analytics and they were like, oh, hold on. You're not just a random person. You already love what we're selling. You're already technically selling it. We didn't know it. So I think the slow roll of that is huge. And then once you have a high listenership, and I mean, I think you need to have listeners in like 4 figures in order to actually make money with advertising, because it doesn't pay a ton. It pays CPM, so like cost per 1,000 basically is what that number is. So it's like $5 per 1,000 listener, or $20 per 1,000 listener. So it depends on the product and the thing, but I joined a podcast network this past year called Connected Podcasts. And so they are currently trying to get advertisements for me, but I'm still doing it for myself too. Just like you would self-submit for auditions as well, I'm still doing my own thing at the same time. And then, I'm sorry, this is such a long answer. I also decided that I didn't want to wait on other people. And so I started to market myself in my podcast. So if I had a class for actors, or I have an actor dictionary that I created, or I have different products that I do, or I have an online membership or things like that, I started putting myself into my podcast because I can advertise on as many of my own podcasts as I want. And I think that's a huge thing. And that's the thing a lot of my podcasts I work with, I talk to about is you are your best product on your podcast. So that's the easiest thing to sell. And now I make the bulk of my One Broke Actress income through my bonus podcasts from Patreon and Apple bonus podcasts. So that is paying some SAG dues, which is pretty cool.
So cool to hear. Yeah. And I think that another like overall theme of this conversation, Sam, you just hit on, is this idea that cultivating these skills as a podcast producer, the business skills in particular, are the same as promoting yourself as an actor or getting yourself out there as an actor. Like there's a creative side to acting, of course, but there's also a business side to acting. And it sounds like for any actors listening who are interested in possibly launching a podcast for any reason, you might then learn the skills or hone the skills, or what, Michelle, what you were talking about of like, you then learn your voice better and then can use that voice to take that with you into the industry. That's so amazing. We have to go. We have to wrap up. This has been such a lovely conversation. Is there any major topics any tips that you guys didn't get to, anything that we should be sure to touch on before we wrap?
My biggest thing is, and obviously read the room if you're on set, it's okay to ask questions. Just do it in a respectful way. Know where you are, but you never know anything unless you ask. And, one of our main goals at CFA, and it sounds like for Michelle and Sam too, it's like creating a safe space for the community, feel like it's okay to not know something.
I love that. I think one of the big takeaways that I've taken from a lot of my episodes of the podcast are that a lot of people just don't get successful as early as I thought. I think for my 20s, and I'm now in my 30s, I kept thinking like, oh my God, is it too late? Like, have I passed something? If I'm not as successful as I want to be as an actor, what does that mean? And I mean, most of my episodes, there are many series regulars. There's also producers, directors, agents, casting directors, and all of them have a story where there's either a pivot or there's perceived failures that really led up to where they are today. And sometimes they're not exactly where they want to be. They're still on their, obviously we're all still on our journey, but there is something beautiful about the fact that it's never too late, that you can change and go back to being an actor. You can change and go back to being anything. There are agents that are huge that only started mid-30s, or casting directors have been doing this with major shows and they only started in their mid-30s or late 30s. There are people, I mean, there's one director who's on my podcast who throughout her 20s was homeless. She was on drugs. She thought she was over. She thought her life was over, and then pivoted, created a film based on her life story, and did well in Sundance, and now is a huge episodic director. So there's just so many stories like that, that's a main takeaway I've gotten from some of my guests that I wanted to share.
Love that.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is the gift of podcasts, is that everyone has something to share and everyone has something to learn. And I think we're all examples of people who accidentally found out we knew more than we knew. And I think any actor can be more than one thing. I think when you sometimes start something, it feels like you're going to lose a part of you. But every actor is multifaceted and multi-hyphenate, and don't feel the need to fall into something and not identify with it. And also, it's going to be messy at first. Just let it. Don't let what is it? The perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't not do it because it's bad at first. My audio was so bad. My podcast interviews were so bad. Whatever. Just keep doing it. It'll get better. Just like it. Honestly, all that's true for acting too. I think everything everyone said is true for acting too.
Totally, 100%. Thank you. Thank you all three for sharing all these amazing insights. I want to shout out podcastcontracts@sagaftra.org is the email address that anyone with questions about the podcast agreements can email that. That's also listed on the sagaftra.org/podcast contracts webpage, which is very Googleable. But yeah, thank you. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with your fellow performers. Thank you, Michelle, Breanna, and Sam. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. Bye.